Serious, Redditors who live in secluded towns, what is the darkest thing that happened in your town but is kept secret? In the early 1990s, a town in my small county in the southern US had a fire in a chicken processing plant. When workers tried to escape, it became apparent that the fire exits and other exits had been locked. Dozens of people died around the exits in desperation in a town of around 2,000. Our state suppressed the investigation due to lobbies, and families received almost none of the compensation funds. Pretty sure there's a song about it. It led to legislation limiting the compensation available to injured workers and relatives of killed workers. Conditions for chicken plant workers in NC are horrible, and many now rely on migrant labor and use threats of deportation to stop workers from organizing or demanding things like bathroom breaks. I didn't live there, but about 20 minutes away, a farm town in Washington where the Mr. Hands incident occurred. People there still don't acknowledge the event. For the uninitiated, a guy enticed a horse to penetrate him in the butt and inadvertently killed him. My grandpa's father was murdered by the wealthiest man in town a long time ago. Not 100% sure of the exact year. Money exchanged hands with law enforcement, and nothing ever came of it. Until one day my grandpa's anger about the situation boiled over, and he threatened to kill the man in retribution. Law enforcement caught wind of it, and in order to save the cover-up, forced him to leave town or be arrested. He moved from that small town bordering two southern states. Hint, it's a mashup name of the two states into one, up to Ohio. He met my grandma, and now I exist, so at least I can blame a murderer for every bad thing that happens to me, since I wouldn't have existed without his crime. The most interesting things go down in Florissippi. I wouldn't say we live in a secluded town, but when my mother was in school, her best friend got a job working for the sheriff. She later came to school and told them that the sheriff had been molesting her. She also began telling people about what they have been using the tunnels under the town for. The police supposedly had been filming child pornography. After that day she never made it home. She was found later naked, hog-tied and shot in the back of the head. No one could prove it, and the sheriff had been suspected of many things, but nothing ever came of it. They just announced that there was a man seen in a white van abducting people, but her friends knew. Her family knows. This is Red Bluff, California BTW. The tunnels were originally used by Chinese immigrants. They go through our main street and through Rio Street. They led to houses and some businesses, but they have been condemned. There are sensors down there though, so if you get in, the police are right there to get you out. The little girl's name was Rochelle Ward, and the sheriff supposedly responsible was Koenig, but he died years back of old age. Holy crap, this one gets me. This is why people are afraid to report their abusers. My mom told me this story once, that back when she was growing up in a small farming community in Ohio, there was some kind of neighborhood party attended by a bunch of families with kids all around the same age. All the kids, including herself, had this like big slumber party in the basement. They wake up the next morning and one of the kids is found in the middle of the road, having been hit with a truck, but with his whole body zipped all the way up in his sleeping bag. None of the kids owned up to doing it, and the adults could never figure it out either. After a while people just started moving on with their lives and everyone pretty much forgot about it. I'll just say, this would be in Salina, Ohio around 1972. If anyone can find sources on it, go for it. I did some googling and couldn't really come up with anything. And some of you I think are right. My mom said she probably thinks it was a prank that went terribly wrong. Thanks so much UCVS 2014 for verifying the story and providing links. Small world. She still maintains that no one knew why he was out there, but I think there's a good possibility she just didn't know, even now. What the heck? A 17-year-old girl was violated and murdered when walking home from school. The whole town went into panic mode, and a homeless man was caught and arrested for the crime. Case closed, right? Later it was found out that she was in a relationship with a judge's son, and he plus some other guys from wealthy local families were seen in a car picking her up around the time of the crime. They all moved to different cities. Nothing ever came of it. Homeless man is still in jail. That's so fricked up. I hate hearing about corrupt officials and innocent people going to prison. Like Jesus, it was a 17-year-old girl and it seems like no one cares. Several young boys, age 9-11, went missing in the village, and it was suspected that a group of boys from the same school were responsible. They were heard talking about it on 2 occasions, about how they kill whoever they don't like. However, their parents apparently attested that they never let them out of sight outside of school hours. This group of kids was known for skipping school to sniff glue and drink alcohol BTW, but their parents obviously denied it. Only one of the 6 missing kids was ever found, in a creek, with injuries like he was stoned to death. Police said he fell down the creek accidentally, though. This was about 20 years ago in Europe BTW. Whoa, that is messed up, man. Shame that the parents didn't care about their kids. Nothing with me, but when my mom was a kid she lived near a state park in New Hampshire. It's called Bear Brook. In the 80s multiple dismembered body parts were found in a blue barrel. An investigation happened but the killer was never found. In the early zeros another barrel was found, dating back to the time of the first barrel. The killer was recently found. His name was Robert Evans. The park is in Allenstown if you want to look it up. The Bear Brook podcast does a great job of explaining this story. When my mom was growing up, a teacher and his wife were killed by an axe murderer. Someone broke into their house and killed them in the middle of the night. They found the husband in the house and the wife in the woods behind it, indicating that she tried to escape and was chased down. Really gruesome stuff. The attack was seemingly random, and they never caught the person responsible. My elementary school was named after the teacher, which wouldn't necessarily be morbid except for the fact that there was a dedication plaque that mentioned his murder. In an elementary school, the 90s were freaking wild. I hate that axe murderer is a real freaking thing and not just some horror movie bulls. In the 80s and early 90s my town was run completely by dirty cops. Drugs were run by the cops and people who didn't do as they were told would go mysteriously missing and eventually, most of them, wind up dead. It took the feds to clean the place up and install a new set of clean cops. Questions about the Copland movie. I've never seen it, but I googled it and no, it's not there. I'm not gonna say the town name of where I'm from because it's an everyone knows everyone one of town. But I'm from a small town in California and still live there. This all happened before my time and I was told about it by people who lived through it. My best friend's dad being one of them. They're a tiny town in New Mexico a couple years back whose whole police force was dirty. One day they were arrested on various charges and the only law enforcement official left was the police dog. It's still happening in my town. This specific event happened directly in my gated neighborhood. A member of a Russian gang got his house shot up before they went inside to finish the job. My wife saw them drag out the body. Organized crime bosses live in my town and the 2 neighboring towns. I live in NJ, Milburn, Westfield, Shorthills, Springfield. I live in one of those towns. That's all I feel comfortable saying, LOL. I'm from Bergen Co and Italian mob bosses used to live here in my town up until the 80s. Some reason mobsters love living in NJ. My town isn't very secluded but I think this still works. So there is this building that used to be a hotel and one day this guy shows up and he takes multiple trips going in and out with a bunch of equipment. They found him a little while later in his room. He had assembled an entire guillotine and cut his head off. Well, that's the first time I've ever done the mildly impressed how to a suicide story. There was a sheriff in my town in rural Louisiana and he was sheriff for about 40 years. Well, our parish at the time when he was sheriff had the highest rate for M production and weed production in the state. There was this one particular M dealer that was never arrested but somehow someone on the other side of the parish would get raided and a bunch of people go to jail but never him, as it turns out, as the relative of the sheriff. That sheriff let M and the money it generated control our parish for decades while he slowly got rich, bought a big house, new cars and always got re-elected. Even though all the locals knew about this, no one cares cause he was a good man or his family has been here since all the old families founded this town, or better, is he just a good ole sheriff who keeps the drugs out of our parish. What's really sad is some corrupt public officials will use a person's addict's family members as voter suppression or leverage in elections. A family friend was super drunk. He was walking home and fell unconscious on the road at the bottom of a hill. Another family friend, small town so we all knew each other, was driving home late. He heard a thump and a crunch when he went over a hill. He got out of the car thinking he hit a wallaby or something. He instead found his friend dead. Everyone decided to forget what he did, because it really wasn't his fault. There was no way he could have seen him asleep at the bottom on the hill in the middle of the road. It was at such an angle that the headlights didn't spot him. It's a bit weird this has come up because I drove past a super drunk dude just a few hours ago on my way home from work. He was drunk and stumbling on the road. He fell over and lost a thong. Flip-flop to you Americans. I called the police and told them. They said they'd pick him up and take him home where he would be safe. Didn't want a repeat of what happened back in my hometown to happen to that random drunk guy. The CEO of our town's electric company beats his wife regularly. He ended up getting arrested for domestic violence and his beatings were pretty horrific. Everyone knows what a craphead he is. In the end he got a good lawyer and the police let him off the hook. No jail time, no fines, nothing. Frick him. Small town of about 2,000 to 2,500 in the Midwest, when suddenly about 1/4 of the population just up and left. No word, no nothing. None of them had kids or extended family and none of the papers said anything about it. This was back in maybe the late 80s. This happened when I was pretty young, but I just remember one day one of my teachers wasn't there and I found out from my parents a ton of people had just left overnight. Most personal belongings were taken with them but mattresses and furniture was still in their houses. I still have no clue what that was about, and when I've asked my parents more recently they said the rumor around town was that all those people worked for the CIA or FBI and were reassigned all of a sudden. I would read the crap out of this book, whether fact-based or novel. The daughter of divorced parents was debauched to death by the mother's boyfriend. She was 6. Her father was contacting CPS and presenting evidence that the man was abusing his daughter under her mother's care. Nothing was done about it until she was life-flighted to Salt Lake where she died of her wounds, and early in the investigation the mother admitted to letting her boyfriend play with her. The worst part is that because the abuser murderer was part of the tribe, all he had to do was stay on tribal lands to not be taken into custody. So while the long process of an FBI investigation and the FBI jumping the correct hoops to make an arrest on tribal land, this man walked freely as long as he was on the reservation. Most people rejected the abuser murderer entirely, but what hurt more is seeing the people who went out of their way to help him. His family tried to open a food truck where the highway passes through the res so he could have a job. It earned a large protest considering the size of the town, and few out-of-towners stopped for tacos, so they fortunately had to shut down. The man's cousin was chief, so he was given a job in the dispensary. Some other members of the tribe who worked there walked out on the job and went to the council to try and stop it. Fortunately, as of now, the FBI has taken the mother and boyfriend into custody and they're awaiting trial. I've been called for jury duty twice now and it's been cancelled each time. I feel so sad for the dad, who knew and needed help but no one would do anything. Coal mine country PA. Lots of stuff happens. Guy was physically shaming his daughter and her friend. Went to jail for a few years. When he came back, his house mysteriously burnt to the ground with him in it. Another guy got caught selling crack to a couple of local kids. Yes, I'm that old. He was found in the middle of the street having been run over by a large vehicle repeatedly. A woman stole some jewelry from her elderly neighbor. She lost her hand in an unknown accident. Guy beat his wife. He left town with 2 hands that were destroyed by a ball-peen hammer. Teenage girl killed another girl's dog over a boyfriend. Now she sports a nasty scar across her face and is missing an eye. That and lots of smaller stuff. Justice is handled locally. The Purge, Justice Edition, but every day. Not far from where my parents grew up is the town of Skidmore, MO, which is honestly a supremely fricked up place of weird sinister stuff. The most commonly known incident is from the 1980s when Ken McElroy was shot to death while sitting in his truck with his wife, in front of the pool hall in town in broad daylight. There were dozens of witnesses who saw the shooting, which came from multiple firearms, but they denied seeing the shooting or who may have been responsible. The news stories from the time sort of painted McElroy as a town bully, almost like Biff from Back to the Future, except he was a freaking violent monster who had beaten, figuratively and literally, over a dozen charges including theft, violation of a minor. Remember his wife? Yep, she was one of the known debauchery victims and carried Ken's child at 14, and other general violent acts, leading up to his town-sanctioned execution. He had the gall to appeal a 2-year sentence for shooting a geriatric grocer in the neck with a shotgun and nearly decapitated him. So, why did he do it? Because the grocer asked Ken's daughter to put back a piece of candy she hadn't paid for. People appeared fed up with this rampaging 6'5", 270-pound thug who thought he could get away with debauchery and wanton violence. So somebody or a group of somebodies shot him at least twice and emptied quite a few rounds into his truck. No witnesses and even his wife who was in the truck refused to identify the shooter. Honestly, our town has so much crime, specifically stabbings, drug use, armed robberies, that it never appears in the town's newspaper anymore, and when people find out they just say something along the lines of, "Oh, again." It's honestly just become so normalized here, yet in the village not even 2 miles away, there hasn't been a crime or a criminal hiding there in years. Another thing is that a mine collapsed and killed a lot of people, both in my town and one nearby. There was never any news coverage on either, and it's extremely hard to find any information about it. Most people I've told had no idea. Lived in the middle of nowhere, Oregon. Found out that a lot of recovering diddlers, from what I heard, mainly diddlers, are sent to smaller towns like mine. IDK how true this was, but there were a lot of freaking weird people in our small town. For an emphasis on small, the most popular location to hang out was the local truck stop. We had a population of roughly 1,300 spread over 40-ish square miles. Found out that a lot of recovering diddlers, from what I heard, mainly diddlers, are sent to smaller towns like mine. I wouldn't be surprised. There's quite a lot of rules about where diddlers can and can't live, and in big cities that usually means they can't go anywhere. I guess that means they've all got to move to Oregon. Over the summer there was a guy found hanging from a tree on the sheriff's property. The sheriff disliked this young man and treated him poorly during his incarceration at the county jail. Many witnesses said that the day he got released from jail, the sheriff invited him to his secluded property and told him he could help him get back on his feet. 2 days later, a couple of teenage boys fishing in a creek discovered the guy hanging in a tree. Authorities was notified. No investigation was done, and it was immediately ruled a suicide. This boy was a known drug addict with no family or friends, so there was really no one to press the issue. The local news wrote a small article on man found dead from apparent suicide, and then it was hush hush after that. It's just one of those things we will never know. That is uber fricked up. The doctor who tried all these wacky treatments to save his young patient from tuberculosis and became infatuated with her. After she died, he eventually robbed her grave, mummified her, and lived with her body for 7 years before being found out. Did not go to jail and lived his years out in town, I believe. Everyone knows about the fun part of Centralia Park, the spooky mine fire, the ghost town, etc. What most don't know about was how divided the town became and how they ganged up on the kid who fell in, Todd. How they harassed him and accused him of lying for political gains. He was just a little kid who suffered a near-death experience, and his own neighbors started a smear campaign against him. About 50-60 years ago, my neighbor's grandfather chased away all minorities from our village. He set their houses on fire and destroyed the properties they left behind, so they never came back. But there are very few minorities in my village to this day. Even tough, that guy is long dead. His grandson is married to the only doctor here and he's a great neighbor. ETA. This got way more attention than I expected, so I'll try to clarify some things. This happened in Hungary and I don't know of any other similar cases here. The towns nearby have noticeably more minorities, and it got me thinking why our village has only 2 gypsy families. When I asked my grandma about this, she told me this story but little else about it. She asked me not to tell this to anyone because only the elders know about it, and some of them deny it ever happened. Apparently my neighbor's grandfather, let's call him Jay, was one of the loudest against the minorities, mostly gypsies, and he decided they had to go. So one night he set their houses on fire and they left. To be fair, I highly doubt this was done by a single person over just one night. It's important to note that my grandmother was a child when this all happened, so she might remember some details wrongly, and since nobody has ever talked about Jay's attack, I can't confirm what exactly happened. I for myself think that 20-30 families can't be thrown out like this overnight, so there are definitely some things that just don't add up. I hope this helps to understand it all a bit better, and feel free to ask more. That's some scary crap right there. Local high school girl gets in a fight with mom and leaves to walk to her friend's house. She never makes it. The family reports her missing. I don't remember the exact time frame, but there are leads that don't go anywhere. Then maybe a month or more later a farmer finds a body in his field about 20 miles away. The catch being that it's off the same road her stepfather, who has records for domestic abuse and even has a file for hitting this same girl on top of the wide variety of abuse against mom and previous partners. Well, this road is the one he takes to work every day. Ultimately it can't be proven. It was overheard by his co-workers him saying she had it coming anyways. Now the mom posts on Facebook a picture of a man and swears up and down everyone needs to leave her and her husband alone and that the man on her FB is the real killer. It's clear to most locals her husband did it and she's covering for him. Nancy Grace talked about it on her show for like 2 weeks straight. My grandparents live in a village which has a huge irrigation canal running across it. A lot of villagers go there to wash their clothes when the water is let out. One day I tagged along with my grandma to wash our clothes there. I helped her with the work and then went to play in the water when she was finishing up. Usually, if you sit very still, tiny fish come to nip at your feet, and it's also pretty interesting to watch all the leaves and flowers that have fallen and floating by. So I was sitting there, as patiently as a 10-year-old could, when suddenly a man ran past, shouting something incoherently at the top of his lungs. No one really pays attention to him, as he was kind of loony in the head, and this was somewhat normal for him. But then, imagine everyone's horror, when after a minute, a half-decomposed body floats by amidst the flowers in the water. Someone had fallen into the water and drowned, and the body had been caught in some dense thickets growing along the canal for some time. I've never scrambled up faster than I did that day. Not so much a dark secret, but my townhouse is a bombing range that is still in use. No one has ever met anyone who works on it. No kids at school ever parents who work there. We never see planes or anything, but there is a guard at the gate. What was truly odd is that if you ask a resident about it, we all say the same thing. Oh, the bombing range. There's nothing out there. Might just be unsafe, so they keep it guarded. In mom's seaside hometown, there's a decommissioned lighthouse offshore. Even though utilities to the lighthouse have long been disconnected and the building locked, residents have noticed the beacon turn on at late hours of the night, just for a few minutes, then mysteriously grow dark again. It happens so infrequently that the time of illumination can't be predicted. As I once described here, no one has figured out how or why this happens. I've always wanted to live in a decommissioned lighthouse, and there would be a button I could press that would send the lighthouse into space. I wouldn't say that it's kept secret, but it's so horrific no one really wants to bring it up. A young, early 20s, mentally challenged woman was out with a male family friend and his friend who were a little younger, I think 18 and 19 at the time. They picked her up and drove her to the woods where they repeatedly stabbed her and then lit her on fire while she was still alive. If that wasn't awful enough, they went back to reburn her body a few days later. She had rejected advances that they were making on her. Her body was found by hikers a few days after she was killed, and a few weeks later both boys were arrested. Both of them plead guilty, but offered no reason for why they did what they did. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.